Hey, Marcus House with you here, and welcome to episode 25 in our quick progression series. Today we want to get a crew ready for our Prosperity space station, which is waiting patiently above us in orbit. But we don't want just any crew on the Prosperity station, no. We want the most epic crew possible, and for that reason, we are going to be training up some Kerbals right up to level 5. And this is going to give us a 25 times drill speed bonus for our engineers, and a 21 times speed bonus for processing data in our labs from our scientists. The problem with this, of course, is we've got to give them 64 experience points just to get them there. Using the Kerbal Space Program Wiki, we can quickly determine from this experience table how many locations we need to visit to obtain the required experience to get the Kerbals to level 5. So in this mission, we are heading out to the moons of Joule along with the Moon and Minmus, which will give us in excess of 64 experience points. You can see here I've hired a bunch of new Kerbals, and it's getting quite expensive now at over 379,000 in funds to hire the next one. We also have 3 more Kerbonauts on Minmus, along with a rescue mission that we've accepted here for Burberry Kerman. You will have seen there as well that most of my Kerbals were either engineers or scientists. I don't find pilots very useful. We need to fund this mission, of course, so I've accepted a bunch of contracts, several of which are creating an orbital station at several locations. We've got our rescue mission for Burberry Kerman stranded at a low Minmus orbit, and we've also got a few science missions for Val. There's also a few other missions to do, such as planting a flag on the moon and grabbing science data from the sun, but we'll head into the vehicle assembly building to check out the vessel that we've made. So here we are. There is nothing overly spectacular about this particular rocket, but the one thing I will note is the large Mk3 passenger module to take all of our Kerbonauts on their mission. So down the bottom here we've got our main atomic rocket motor stage powered entirely by the liquid fuel tanks. And we can keep on refueling this with these drill units that we've got attached. We've also got landing legs on this bottom stage for when we need them, and we've also of course got a heat shield above this stage for when we re-enter this entire thing back into Kerbin. To make very fine corrections with our manoeuvres, we have some RCS thrusters here, and we also have a full set of science instruments and communications devices for basically anything we need. Of course, there's a whole lot of time available in our mission to process some science in our mobile processing lab here. Thermal control systems there for when we're drilling, and a few small modern propellant tanks above that. 4 Gigantor solar arrays along with a battery. Now you might want to have some more battery storage than this, but I was able to do this mission quite fine with the one. We have our cupola module here, which is really just here because I had a mission requirement for it to be here. Doesn't need to be on your vessel. To convert our ore to fuel, we've got a Convertitron 125 with a couple of small ore tanks, and we've got our Science Junior and Grabber unit on top there. So we can now select our crew, and obviously we're going to pop the entire crew from the KSC into the Mk3 module. We also have 3 spots left in the passenger module for our crew that are on Minimus. And then we've still got a few extra seats if we need them, one being for Burberry Kerman, who is currently stranded at Minimus. And we have our main booster stage powered by a single Mammoth engine, and this has got over 3000 Delta V in it, so it's going to get us pretty much most of the way to orbit. Our main atomic rocket motor stage is going to give us just shy of 3,500 meters per second in Delta V. So this stage of course is going to be refueled multiple times, so that 3,500 Delta V will be available to us multiple times throughout our mission. And you'll find that 3,500 meters per second in Delta V is almost enough Delta V to get pretty much anywhere you need. So by now you've probably seen plenty of missions where we talk all about launching and launch profiles. In this mission though, there's a lot to cover, and so that we can do it all in one episode, we're going to cut out all the unnecessary video. Completing our booster stage burn here, and we're going to decouple that and let that fall back into the atmosphere and just complete the burn on our atomic rocket motor stage. Solar panels out there, and we already have a maneuver node set up to intercept with the moon. Quite a long burn there on our atomic rocket motor stage, but we did have enough thrust to wait to do it in the one orbit. Before we land on the moon, however, I'm going to grab this bit of space junk that's been sitting here since episode 8. This was back when we first picked up Lenina Kerman, and that was even before we sent the mission to Minmus with our science lab. What we're going to do is use our advanced grabber unit that's on the top of this vessel just to grab hold of Lenina's derelict and release it as we pass below the orbital speed of the moon as we come into land. There is still one more piece of space junk around the moon here that I have to get rid of at some point too. Bringing the periapsis down there so that we can prepare for our landing. Doing our landing burn here now, and as we pass below orbital speed we're going to release Lenina's derelict. That of course means that Lenina's derelict is going to impact harmlessly on the surface of the moon, leaving us with one less piece of space junk. Reducing there most of our horizontal velocity, and then coming down vertically for hopefully a nice smooth landing. Landing legs there are out and ready of course. So you can see there that the thrust to weight ratio is easily enough to handle a body like the moon. And just touching down there now, on a little bit of a slope there but not too bad. So at the same time there we've completed one of our missions. We've built a surface outpost on the moon for 171,000 there, so that's great. So you can see there, to get from low Kerbal orbit to the moon used most of our delta V. We had very little fuel left. So we've already deployed our mining drills and our thermal protection systems, so we can actually switch on our convertitron unit and our drills and begin the mining process so that we can fill our liquid fuel tanks right back up again. Now as we refuel here, we can talk a little about the power of engineers, and the reason that we're doing this in the first place is to get level 5 engineers and level 5 scientists of course, but more so for the engineers to make refueling that much faster. Now this step is optional. We're going to EVA all of our Kerbals out and plant a flag, and this is simply because you do get a little bit more experience for doing this. In this case on the moon it's actually only 0.4 of an experience point for doing this extra planting a flag step. The one thing as well that you'll notice if you read the experience page on the Kerbal Space Program wiki is that experience is not cumulative. As an example of that, you don't get 4.6 experience for landing on the moon and then another 5 experience for planting a flag. You will only get experience from the most valuable achievement around a body. Just planting the rest of those flags, and as we complete that step, we'll send all of our little Kerbals back into the vessel, ready for takeoff. Now of course before you take off you'll possibly have a heap of new science to collect with your science instruments, so make sure that you don't forget to pick up all the science. It certainly doesn't hurt to do that at the same time. We've also now completed another contract, which was to plant a flag on the moon. So we'll take off now, off towards our next destination, which is going to be Minmus. We're off now to pick up our 3 Kerbonauts that have been working on our mobile processing lab on Minmus, so they're well entitled to a break. Just completing a burn to get into the moon's orbit and then completing a maneuver to escape the moon's sphere of influence. Just now needing to do a few extra maneuvers to match Minmus's inclination, and of course to set up an intercept with Minmus. Now the first thing we need to do as we come into Minmus is actually complete our rescue contract, which involves creating an intercept here to come in and rescue Burberry Kerman. And the wonderful thing about this mission is we can actually pick up Burberry Kerman and we can level him up as we complete the rest of our missions here. So again, using our advanced grabbing unit to capture Burberry's capsule, and there we go there, already captured. When we could just transfer Burberry in, and we've completed the parameter of that contract already, and also completed the contract to build a space station around Minmus. And then obviously we can again, as we're coming down into Minmus, release that capsule so that it's going to impact without leaving the space junk around. Obviously we'd set ourselves up to land right near the Minmus science base and just touching down. So all we need to do is transfer the crew from the Minmus science base over to our super trainer vessel. Just doing an EVA and oh no, oh jeez. That was lucky. I can't believe the solar panel stayed intact. Over we go there. I landed around half a kilometre away. I probably could have got a tad closer, but no matter. There we go there. So again, we're going to EVA out all of our Kerbals so that we can start planting some flags. 17 Kerbals now, the 13 we started with, plus the 3 in our Minmus science base, and also Burberry Kerman now. Again, this planting flag step isn't really necessary. In Minmus's case, it's only going to give us half an experience point for each Kerbal. So we'll send all of our Kerbals back up into the Super Trainer vessel. We've just earned 6.25 experience points for any Kerbal that hadn't already planted a flag on Minmus. Just doing a quick refuel here to top our tanks off. We didn't use a huge amount of fuel to get from the moon to Minmus. So using our interior overlay, you can see that we've got a very full MK3 passenger module there now. Obviously pick up any science experiments that you need to pick up and then lift off, and we're going to head off now to Joule. The next step of our journey is to set up a maneuver to do a Joule Encounter. And from Joule we're going to pick up all the rest of the experience that we're going to need to level our Kerbals right up to level 5. This leg of our journey is going to be the most complicated one because we need to get all the way from here to Pole and actually land on Pole in the Joule system. We of course need to do that with the tank of fuel that we've got available to us. To make an efficient transfer utilising the Oberth Effect, we want to actually loop down well inside Kerbin's gravity well and shoot ourselves off to actually do our Joule Encounter. If you're not sure what the Oberth Effect is or why you should utilise it, check out this video that I've got linked here. To summarise the effect, you basically want to do your burn at the highest velocity possible, meaning we dive right down into Kerbin's gravity well and do our burn when we are at the highest velocity. Just doing our burn here now, and we're essentially just needing to add 1100 meters per second in velocity to actually do our transfer. Now, if you were to have first gone out of Kerbin's sphere of influence and then done your transfer, you would have found that it would have cost you many more hundreds in Delta V just to make that same maneuver. So to date, we haven't actually had any Kerbals leave the sphere of influence of Kerbin. So this is the first time we've been able to collect all this science data. So we'll grab all that, we're loading it all into our lab. And remember, you can actually pick up and take the data with a scientist and actually load it into your command modules or your science lab for easy storage. That way you can do as many measurements around all different biomes and different sphere of influences as you need. Sphere of influences? I don't know if that's actually a term. Spheres of influence would probably have been better. Just reboarding our scientist there. At the same time as we're time warping to actually get into Joule's sphere of influence, we're going to, of course, process all of that wonderful data in the science lab and transmit it back to Kerbin very frequently, basically. There's lots of opportunities to do this on the way to Joule. Now that we've entered Joule's sphere of influence, we can again measure all of our science instruments, and as well we can head out with our scientist, pick up all those readings and store them back in our mobile processing lab. In a previous episode where we travelled to Joule, I did the same manoeuvre here that I'm doing now, and that is using Tylo to actually give us a gravity assist to essentially reduce a huge amount of our velocity so that we don't need to actually do a retrograde burn after we get into Joule. So as long as Tylo's in a decent position, you should be able to set up a manoeuvre to actually slingshot you out to give you a pretty close encounter to Pole, which is where we're going today. Of course, by utilising this gravity assist, we're also going to do a Tylo flyby, giving us more points. So because we're doing a Tylo flyby, that's worth 8 experience points for each of our Kerbals. And then Tylo's gravity assist here is going to drop us straight into a Joule orbit from a flyby, so that's going to give us another 9 experience points for each Kerbinaut. So basically we've spent no fuel at all actually getting into a Joule orbit, and now we've only got to do a few small corrections to actually get an encounter with Pole. Pole, of course, has only got a very low gravity, even compared to the moon, so landing on Pole is a very good step to do our refuel. And that should then mean we've got virtually a full tank of fuel to do our Val missions. Descending here down onto Pole's surface and touchdown there. Now, whenever you're picking a landing site, you do want to select one that's got ore that's available so that you can refuel. Refueling here now. It can be a very good idea to actually have a survey scanner around so that you've actually at least got an idea on where you should land that's safe for refueling. So again, all of our Kerbinauts out on the surface of Pole to take a group photo. There's been no expense spared, and we've attached a camera to a rocket to actually take this shot. Luckily, the footage was reversed just for safety reasons. So all of our Kerbals again planting flags. So we've now received 20 experience points from Pol in total now, which is only 1.6 more than if we hadn't have gotten out and planted flags at all. Again, planting flags isn't really an overly necessary step in this. After storing all those science experiments, we're off again, this time to Val. Now we do definitely need a very full tank of fuel here, and that's because we not only have to get lower down into Joule's gravity well to actually intercept with Val, but we also need to land on Val as well, and Val is actually quite a difficult body to land on. It's actually got more gravity than the moon. So we've got our manoeuvre set up to exit Pol's sphere of influence in a retrograde direction. Now Pol does have a slightly offset inclination at around 4 degrees, so we need to wipe that back off here at our descending node. Just doing the burn there now. Bringing that down. And there we go, that's fixed there. Now we just need to set up an intercept with Val, which is quite easy at this point. But what we want to do here, instead of coming in over the equator, is actually come in a polar orbit. You can see there, just to get our intercept with Val is around 400 meters a second, so any maneuver down around Joule here is very expensive. Burning, burning, burning. And there we go, there is our intercept with Val. Again, we want to come in over the poles of Val just so that we can conduct the gravity scan missions that we picked up back in Mission Control. Now, I didn't come in overly clean there for some reason, so I just had to do a quick adjustment to bring ourselves into the correct orbit, and now doing a retrograde burn to bring ourselves into a near polar orbit. Now, these gravity scan missions are actually really good, but the easier ones to do are the ones where all of your different measurements need to be done above a certain altitude. If you've got some above and some below, then you need to keep adjusting your altitude, and it's a real pain in the neck. Just grabbing that first gravity scan there now. So the reason we've got a polar orbit here is essentially so that the planet can spin underneath us, so we can just sit there in an orbit until the gravity measurement point that we need to scan is actually directly under us, and this can take a little bit of time. One of the frustrating things here is that you've got a limit on how much you can time warp depending on how close you are to the body. To fix that issue though, you can just jump over to another vessel and time warp until you're very close to where you need to take your measurement. So contract complete there, we've picked up quite a lot of funds from that mission. So now that we're finished with those gravity scans, we're going to bring our periapsis right down, and we want to target our landing site to be very close to the equatorial plane so that we're getting as much sunlight each day as we can. There we go there, we'll do another burn up at our periapsis marker to bring the apoapsis back down. So wiping off here over 700 meters per second in orbital velocity. I essentially want to remove all the horizontal velocity just so that I'm descending vertically. Now when you're descending vertically like this, you can use the suicide burn readouts that I've got in the top right there from Kerbal Engineer. As the suicide burn distance gets close to 0, we actually start doing our burn full throttle. This essentially allows us to do our burn so that we're not going to spend too much time fighting gravity as we descend. Of course, a real life example of this would be SpaceX, who uses a suicide burn to actually touch down on the drone ship. Of course, they do it a lot more accurately than me, so just touching down here now, and whoa, on another slope again. So there we are on Val, refueling away now. Those suicide burn readouts are really only useful if you're coming down vertically, not so much horizontally. They are very handy though, especially for planets and bodies that have got quite high gravity like this one. So we've picked up a few milestones there, which is great. We've done our first flight and landing on Val. Spending a bit of time refueling there because I had to keep on switching the drills back on. It'd be nice actually if the devs would put in a feature so that the drills could kick back in when there's enough power to do so. Refueling complete there, and we'll get all of our Kerbals back out to touch down on the surface. Just like with Pol, the experience that we're going to pick up here around Val is identical, so we're going to get 20 points for planting these flags. Again, planting the flags is only worth 1.6 extra experience per Kerbal, but we'll do it anyway. There we go, all flags planted, that's beautiful. So this was our last mission for this leg of the journey. We're going to start heading back now to Kerbal. Everybody back in the vessel. And we've picked up the science data from the surface of Val. That's our last Joule contract. and a few more milestones, a spacewalk and planting flags. Again, remember to pick up all those wonderful science experiments, and off we go. We're going to head back now to Kerbal. Of course, if you're doing this mission yourself, you could obviously hop to other biomes, you could jump to other bodies around Joule and land and take all sorts of readings. There's really no limit to what you can do. Obviously, the main point of this mission was to level up our Kerbals to level 5 as fast as possible, so we'll leave the mission there and head back. A beautiful Joule rise there as we wait to do our circularization burn. So just to get off Val there, we needed over half of our fuel, so we need to be very efficient in our transfer back to Kerbal. Now obviously the main thing we want here is to eject out of Joule's sphere of influence in a retrograde direction. This certainly isn't the most simple manoeuvre, and it can take some time and practice to get manoeuvres like this correct. Watching the Joule system fall away from us there. When doing our ejection burn from Joule, of course, we want to make sure that Kerbal is in the correct position for an encounter. On the long journey back to Kerbal now, and obviously again we can keep on processing that science, doing all the science experiments we can, keep on transmitting that science back once it's processed, and rinse and repeat until we're all the way back home, or you've run out of science to actually process, of course. There is a limit to how much data can be stored in your lab at any one time, so you can keep filling that back up as you make your journey back to Kerbal. On the way back, I did do an inclination adjustment just so that we were lined up perfectly. Again, just doing a few small corrections here, so we're going to be coming in over the equatorial plane. We essentially want to be coming in as close as possible to the Kerbal Space Center, if we can actually pull that off, that is. So as we come into Kerbal now, we just need to bring our periapsis right in so that we're going to be skipping through the atmosphere. Just a very small radial in adjustment here, and it's so small that we can just use our RCS thrusters using the H and N keys. We're just going to bring that down to around the 40km mark. And there we go there. So we're going to be coming in at quite a high velocity at over 3,500 meters per second. Even with a big heat shield, a lot of our parts are going to have a lot of stress coming in here, so we're going to use the rest of our fuel just to knock off as much velocity as we can before our tanks are empty. So there we go, decoupling there, and we wiped off around 600 meters per second, so that's going to help a lot with the re-entry heat as we pass through the atmosphere for the first time. So this is going to be our first pass through the atmosphere, moving at over 3,200 meters per second at our highest velocity. Now, if we hadn't have reduced our velocity on the way in here, we probably would have lost a few of those parts. So it's good to do a first pass just to get ourselves into a Kerbal orbit, and then we can actually do a couple of corrections with RCS to see if we can bring ourselves in quite close to the Kerbal Space Center. Re-entering here, just hoping that we can get close. How close can we get? Come on, come on. Actually, we are going to get quite close. We want to get past those mountains. We do not want to land on those mountains. Perfect. Out come the parachutes. And we actually lost a couple of our solar arrays by the looks of that. Oh well. Parachutes deployed there. Coming down. And touchdown there. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Bouncing a little. Oh, no, we're all good. Oh, wow, that is awesome. We'll recover the vessel there, and we'll check out the huge amount of science we've collected. 51 experiments recovered there with over 3,500 science earned, and that doesn't even count the mobile processing lab science that's already been transmitted. But most importantly, there's all our Kerbals at level 5. Isn't that awesome? Even Burberry Kerman, who we picked up as a rescue around Minmus, he's been leveled up to level 5 as well, so that's excellent. Now, if you didn't know, in the astronaut complex you can hover over a Kerbal and you can see a log of all the different experience that's been achieved by that Kerbal. In this case, we can see that Lenina Kerbal has planted a flag on the moon, orbited Kerbal, planted a flag on Minmus, orbited the sun and Joule, done a flyby of Tylo, and planted flags on both Pole and Val. So that's exactly what you'd expect to see based on the experience table in the Kerbal Space Program wiki, and Lenina there now has 76 points of experience. So when we go into our vehicle assembly building and go to select our crew, there they all are, all level 5. So obviously at the same time we recovered our vessel, we completed our final contract rescuing Burberry Kerman and bringing him back to the Kerbal Space Center. And another 11 milestones there, which were returning home from the surface and from flybys. There were a few disasters along the way, which I've recorded here. So I hope you enjoyed that mission. If you have any questions for me, whack them down in the comments below. Thanks very much to all of you that have subscribed. I just passed 2,000 subscribers this week, so thank you very much. For those that haven't yet, please do subscribe to see more. Follow me on Twitter at MarcusHouseGame. And we'll see you in the next video. I'm not even going to make any more adjustments with the RCS. We'll just be patient, wait for them to pull themselves back in together. And there we go, docked there. That is awesome. So we'll bring out those solar panels again. And what you'll notice there is that our solar panels are going to serve two purposes. They're going to not only give us a huge amount of energy, but they're also going to shade our habitat unit.